All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If you've been tuning in this month, you know that we have been celebrating conservation. We've been talking to scientists, explorers, conservationists from all over the world who have dedicated their lives to protecting ecosystems, as well as the amazing biodiversity of species found within them. So it's been an absolutely amazing month so far. We've been bouncing all around the world. You can check out the events still coming up this month because there's lots more to go at exploringbytheseat.com. And you can find a whole list of events, and we'll be launching our December events shortly as well. All right, continuing with our theme, I'm really excited to be connecting with Dr. Rachel Graham today. Over the past 23 years, she has worked to reverse declines in several tropical countries of shark species in Latin America, Africa, Oceania, and she does this by engaging local fishers and communities, as well as bringing science to the forefront of what she does, helping to protect threatened species like hammerheads, whale sharks, manta rays, and more. So to help do this and create these alliances and move the needle for shark conservation, she founded MarAlliance, which is now based in 5 countries and working with many coastal fishing communities to help spread the word and protect these amazing species that we do have. So I'm going to bring Rachel in now, coming to us live from Panama. Rachel, it's so great to have you joining us live for today's event.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me. And it's just a pleasure to be able to join you this morning and tell you more about sharks and the work that we do with communities. This is exciting. So many of you tuning in. This is absolutely splendid. So thank you. And indeed, I am tuning in from Panama. And thank goodness we have a break. No rain for the moment. We've just managed to skirt 2 big storms, Eta and Iota. So our heart goes out to all those who are dealing with that at the moment. But I'm glad that you can be with us today.
All right, excellent. Well, right back at you. We're excited to have you joining in. We've got great groups joining us from across North America. I can see some shout outs starting in the YouTube chat, so keep those coming in. You can see we've got classrooms in Alberta joining us, classrooms in Ontario, looks like Michigan as well. So keep those intros coming in, and we'll be looking for your questions shortly. But Rachel, I'm going to let you take over now, and then we're going to rock some Q&A after.
Okay, splendid. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen. And let's see here. Oh, there we go.
There it is. We got it.
Perfect. Let's see, except it's not showing my window. Excuse me 1 second. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, everybody. Well, I want to tell you about community-based research and conservation of sharks. A lot of people see a lot of shark work being done on big boats and kind of at government level and more. And I want to talk to you about the grassroots efforts that go into shark conservation and research, and how this might actually be one of the most resilient ways of doing research, especially when you have hiccups like, well, issues like the pandemic and other things that can really stop conservation and research from moving forward. But, you know, first of all, I really want to address a couple of things like the fact that we have issues in terms of perceptions with sharks. As you know, a lot of people are scared of sharks. We've actually even done surveys in places like Belize, Honduras, and Panama, and we found that over 50% of people are really, really scared of sharks. And so we have a lot of work to try and reverse that fear of sharks and really get people to appreciate them for the incredible animals, the evolved animals that they are. And this fear goes back hundreds and thousands of years, even to the times of the Maya. By the way, the word shark is supposed to have come from the Mayan word shock, X-O-C. So pretty cool there. And that was hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And it's unfortunately, this fear is perpetrated by the media in many instances. They love to show sensationalism, and even the film companies like Sharknado. So we have a lot to do to try and change people's minds and show them as being really quite amazing and less and animals not to be so feared. And the reason I'm showing you this picture of Bambi is because actually more people are wounded and actually killed by Bambi than they are sharks. Right now, we have about 6 fatalities globally, entirely around the world from sharks. And they're not attacks, they're incidences. A lot of the time, it's people are mistaken for fish. Fish is really what sharks like to eat. And Bambi is responsible for 130 mortalities in the United States alone. So who is more dangerous? And would you actually look at sharks in a different way if, for example, they looked like this? And I do love to show this because if they didn't have those serrated teeth, etc., then they might have a different, people might have a different viewpoint about them. And they really deserve our respect because sharks have actually been around for far longer than dinosaurs. Over 400 million years, we now have 8 orders of sharks that encompass over 530 species of sharks. And they live in the coast. Actually, 50% of all species live in the coasts. They also live in the open oceans, like the makos and the oceanic whitetips and the silky sharks, and also on the bottom and in deep waters, like the 6-gill shark and many more. And like I mentioned, these guys don't really like people. They don't go after mammals unless they happen to be a great white and the great white happens to be an adult. They like fish. And so one thing to remember is that they don't occupy only the top part of the food chain. They actually occupy many levels in the food chain. And that is not just as adults, but also as they're growing up. Just like you, when you were babies, you didn't start out eating steak and broccoli. You started out with milk, then you went to soft foods, and then you went on to maybe, I don't know, pasta, and then you went on to tougher meats, etc. It's exactly the same for many of these species of sharks. And what's interesting is that the largest shark of them all, the whale shark that you see on the lower right-hand side that can reach over 60 feet in length, actually feeds on some of the smallest animals in the ocean. And those are the little copepods, the surgested shrimp, and even fish eggs. And in fact, that's a beautiful segue for me to tell you about the story of how I got started in community-based shark research and conservation, and how this has inspired actually many other similar projects around the world. It started 22 years ago and in the small country of Belize, which is no larger than Rhode Island. And I was working at that time with a range of fishers to look at their catches and see, how did their catches change over the year? Have they been declining, increasing, and more? And what we found is that at a particular time of the year, March, April, and May, the catches increased tremendously. And it was mainly for a set of snappers. Now, these are these beautiful fish that are generally red in color, and they were catching large numbers of them, but they were filled with eggs and milk, which indicated that they were probably fishing on a spawning aggregation site where many of these fish come together at a particular time and place, and then they reproduce by extruding the eggs if they're female and the milk if they're male, and then there's fertilization in the water column. So consider spawning aggregations to be like your savings bank. You don't want to take your savings out after you've put them in. Those are the fish with roe. You want to be able to keep them there so that they can reproduce for years to come. And the bigger fish have more eggs, and their eggs are of better quality. So fishing on spawning aggregations is not necessarily the best practice to ensure long-term sustainability for a fishery. So we were there to look at what's going on with this fishery. And we went underwater and we started seeing these tornadoes of snappers. I mean, huge snappers, the ones you're seeing in the screen right now, those are over 2 to 3 feet long, and they're called Kubera snappers. And lo and behold, what the fishers had told us, that these big sharks were coming in at the same time that they were fishing these snappers, was absolutely true. And there came my incredible respect for traditional knowledge, that all these men and some women who are out on the sea day after day really are the ones, the gatekeepers of information on the sea. I like to say they have PhDs of the sea, because they understand the changes in weather and what's happening with the fish and more, but they didn't know why these big sharks were there. So at that time, I thought, let's figure that out. And a lot got catalyzed by one of my favorite ever whale sharks, Mr. Facey, who loved to tuck his snout right into our bellies. And in fact, on a couple of occasions, I had to crawl right over the top of Mr. Facey in order to actually get away. I almost ran out of air once, but he was so sweet. And I'm just going to show you some of how incredibly docile these animals actually are. This was me actually tagging one of the whale sharks, because there were only 5 people working on whale sharks back in the late 90s. I was one of them, and many of them were in Australia and in other parts of the world. So we wanted to know, these are the questions from the fishermen. Again, they really are curious about their environment. How many are there? Where are they going to? What are they doing? Are they coming back every year? So we used some of the state-of-the-art technology that became available in the late 90s and early 2000s. And in this particular case, I'm showing one of the pieces of technologies that you can see right behind the shark here. It's a little towed tag. It's called a satellite position only tag. And you see how slow moving this animal is. Every time it's at the surface, that tag goes up to the surface. It has a little antenna, and it helps to actually tell us where that animal is. And this has been incredibly important, because it helped us define that these animals don't just stay put in this site down here in Belize. They actually move over to the restaurant in Honduras, where they eat different kinds of food, little fish. Then they move up to Mexico, and they eat other types of fish eggs from a tuna. And then they move all over the place into the Gulf of Mexico, even over to Cuba. And it's like us. We don't just want to eat Italian food all the time. We might want Mexican, or we might want Thai. Well, whale sharks are a little the same way. So these types of tags, these toe tags, help give us some of that information. And then we were very curious to know is how many of these animals actually existed. And so we kept taking pictures of the side of the animal, especially behind the gills, as you see in this yellow square. And it's almost like a digital fingerprint. And several of my colleagues, Brad Norman, Jason Holmberg, Zavin Azurmanian, developed the technique in which to extract that fingerprint and then determine which are the individual animals. And lo and behold, through amazing work done by my colleagues and myself, we were able to estimate a population for whale sharks in the Western Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico. 2,167 animals. This is through the use of this incredible portal called wildmewhalesharks.org. So if you ever swim with a whale shark and you have a picture of the side of the whale shark, submit it to whaleshark.org. You might think 2,167 is big, but think of a football stadium. You're going to have 10,000 people in there. And this is the entire population for the Western Atlantic. And a nod to the person who led this particular population study, and that's Dr. Jennifer McKinney. Fantastic woman who is juggling not only a child, but a demanding career in science. Yes, you can do it all. So we got these guys protected in Belize. They got protected in other places. I trained a lot of other people in whale shark science. Then what? A lot of the fishers I was working with said, you know what? This is great. This is wonderful news. And you've developed this tourism that's generating millions of dollars in Belize, and it's helping transition fishers to other economic alternatives like tourism. Wonderful. But what's going on with the many other species of sharks in Belize and in other countries? It seems like they're declining. And that was exactly the question that I had. What is going on with the other species of sharks, rays, skates, and chimeras, all known as chondrichthyan fish? Why? Because they have a cartilaginous skeleton. Cartilaginous skeleton, like the tip of your nose, inside your ear, means that they can be lighter and so that they don't have to expend so much energy when they're moving, because the majority of sharks have to keep moving in order to oxygenate their gills. So what about these many other species of sharks, rays, skates, and chimera? What was happening with them? Like the reef shark, or the scalloped hammerhead, the manta ray, even the simple, humble nurse shark, which is one of the most frequently seen sharks in the Caribbean. Well, we knew that fishing was taking a really big toll on sharks. We were seeing sharks being landed. We were seeing a lot of impact from nets, especially because they're very indiscriminate fishing gear. They were catching sharks left, right, and center, especially when, for example, they were abandoned in the sea, like drift nets. And so they keep fishing. As those nets keep bobbing around in ocean, they keep fishing, and they're used to also get huge numbers of sharks in predictable locations at predictable times, like when the female sharks are ready to pup, it's called, when they're having their young. They usually go to shallow areas, coastal areas that are warm water, where there'll be a lot of food for their young, because there's no parental care. Once you're born, if you're a shark or a ray, your mommy's not going to take care of you. You're on your own. So you better know how to be able to forage for food immediately. But those behaviors are also very well known by fishers. And so you can scoop up a lot of little baby sharks or pups in one fell swoop with nets, as you can see in the back of a pickup truck here from one of the catches from a net fisherman in Panama. And so we were trying to estimate how many of these sharks are actually being taken from the oceans, and some amazing work done by Dr. Shelley Clark, over 15 years ago now, estimated up to 73 million sharks were being taken from the ocean. That's right, 73 million sharks. And when you think of how many people have incidents with sharks that lead to a fatality in a year, it's 6, right? So we need to keep some perspective there. And it's not just for fins. You're seeing all the fins drying on these rooftops in Hong Kong. And the fin market has driven a lot of the shark fisheries in the world. But that's not the only thing. It's also meat. And it's one of the reasons why I focused a lot on Central America, because meat is incredibly important. It's a protein source. There's not many bones in it and more, but we have found out through our analyses of the tissues that these actually have a lot of methyl mercury. For those of you who've seen the old style thermometers with the mercury in it, that's actually a very toxic substance that can really impact your brain and your organs. So you don't want to eat it, and you don't want to eat animals that have high levels of it, like sharks. And the other aspect in Central America, which makes it rather interesting, is that religion plays a part in promoting the eating of shark and fish during the Easter season, because you're asked not to, by the church edict, to not eat red meat. I would say just reduce your consumption of seafood, fish, and of course sharks altogether. And I would say even meat. It's just better for you, and it's better for the planet. So where does that leave sharks? Well, we did a huge assessment in 2004, a whole bunch of experts, 160 experts around the world. It's being redone at the moment. And what did we find? We found that 24% of all sharks, rays, skates, and chimeras in the world, so over, in this case, assessed 1,000 species, were threatened with extinction. So if things continue to go the way they are, we're just not going to see these animals. And what is even more troublesome is that almost 50% of these species, 50%, half, We don't even have enough information or data to be able to determine their populations and to determine how they're doing. So this is a shout out to you, because if you want to get into this field and you want to study sharks and you want to understand how things are going, there's a lot of scope and a lot of space for you to do work. Think of that. 50% of all the species known, we don't even know enough to be able to assess their situation. And this is dire when you think of the sawfish, which used to be abundant throughout Central America, which you see down here, and which now you can very, very rarely find. So we've got some projects working on trying to bring that back with communities. And why such a rapid decline in 30 to 40 years in sharks? How is that happening? Well, your dog or your cat, if you happen to have pets like a dog or a cat, you know that they can reach maturity and have babies within a year. But sharks, most sharks will not reach maturity, the bigger sharks, until they're 10 or 15 years old. The whale shark, we're thinking 25, 30 years old. And in this case, the Greenland shark was recently found to not reach sexual maturity until it's 150 years old and may live to over 500 years. So you can take a few, you just can't take a lot, or else the population can't come back. It can't bounce back. And that is what we're trying to promote. We're not saying no to all fisheries. No, what we're saying is we need to have more rational fisheries that align with the biology of these animals. If they take 10 years to be able to have babies, well, then we need to think of management in a very different way than we do with a lot of the, what we call fin fish, right? The bony fish like your snappers, which can usually reach maturity at 4 or 5 years. Yes, that's true. Groupers, 6 years. So you'll be looking at your fish on a plate in a very different way now, knowing that it takes them 2, 3, 10, 100 times longer than your cat or your dog to actually have babies. And I like to say, I love to show this meme because this is the most dangerous animal in the world. It is responsible for millions of deaths every year. By its side, a great white shark swims peacefully. So this is, again, let's really change our thinking. Sharks are not out to get us. They really are not. They want fish first and foremost, and we're even taking the fish away from them. So it's getting hard for them to even survive. So how do we reverse the declines? Let's talk about that. You can't just focus on research, right? Research is great, and we need it to fill the gaps of knowledge and to inform how we're going to move forward with our conservation. You need all other steps that you see here in this diagram. You need to be able to look at fisheries. You need to be able to educate and enthuse. You need to be able to work with clearly all the communities and the managers, and you need to work with governments so you can put policies in place that help in the conservation of these animals, legal frameworks. So you can't just focus on one aspect in many cases in these countries. And the focus that I mentioned was on Central America, first and foremost, because we have little information, especially on the Caribbean side. We're increasing with the information on the Pacific side, and because there are so many challenges and usually fairly high populations as well. So how do we promote the research and conservation, but ensure that we have as many people on board as possible? Well, I developed a set of 3 monitoring methods, which would first off really engage traditional fishers, because they are on the front lines of knowing what's going on in the sea, and they're the first ones to lose out if there's any measure to try and protect a fishery or a species, etc. So they need alternative incomes, they need alternative ways of looking at these species as well. So in following on from all that work that I did with the whale sharks, where we got them protected and we transitioned a lot of fishers over to tourism, we then transitioned them over to research as well and monitoring. And we use baited remote underwater videos that you see here, underwater visual censuses. Also, we actually catch them We catch them, we measure, tag, and more, and we're going to show you exactly how this works. So I've trained hundreds of traditional fishers across many countries in the tropics. And why the tropics? Because it's where we find the highest diversity of sharks and rays in the world. And so it's a really good place to focus. And it's also where we have the least amount of information on a lot of these species. So what's wonderful is after training so many fishers, these fishers have gone on to train many other fishers in other countries. We've had exchanges with Micronesia and Panama and Cuba and Mexico and more. And they train them in technologies and methods. And everything is done from very small boats. We're very humble in the way that we work. And that makes it more engaging. And it means that more people can participate. We don't use tanks. We use snorkel. And that's really, really important in our underwater visual censuses, where we count all the animals we come across over the course of 1 kilometer. And that helps us to analyze distribution, abundance of animals, and also diversity, so how many species there are. And the cool thing is that even though many of the fishers will not engage in the analysis of data, they see that this site has more than this site, this country more than this country. And so they themselves can see how data is collected and can see the differences between abundances inside a marine protected area, which are declared in the hopes of being able to conserve some of these species, especially the threatened ones. They can see that firsthand. And that's very, very important, because when we all sit around the table to try and come up with conservation measures, we need them as allies, and they need to know how the data was actually collected. So it also gives us an opportunity to do things like get rid of nasty nets that keep fishing long after they've been abandoned. The other method that we use is camera trapping. And just like in the terrestrial realm, we also use camera trapping, but we use, again, really simple techniques, PVC piping, bait cage at the end, you see here, and then a GoPro camera. And this is what you can get. Let's see if we can make him go. Come on, there we go. This is a lovely tiger shark who's rather curious. He likes the bait, and you see him closing his nictitating membrane over his eye, because he needs to protect his eye, because ultimately he's a very visual predator. And he's very curious about also the electrical impulses that are being provided by the GoPro camera. And so what does this give us? How do we visualize the data? Well, let's look again at that Mesoamerican reef area in Central America and see the red square. You see, this is the Roatan, part of the Bay Islands in Honduras. And we thought that we'd see lots of sharks down here because it's a marine protected area and there's tourism and it's, they're protected. What we found when we did all of our work, especially with underwater cameras, is we didn't see anything down in the marine protected areas. All the sharks and everything had skedaddled to the far end of Roatan, which was not so protected. Why? Well, many studies are now showing that sharks are really scared of people, and for good cause. You saw the 73 million. And so the more remote the location is, generally, the more sharks you're going to see. And I did mention there's a third technique that we use, and that is where we actually catch the sharks. We catch them with hooks. And then we take out the hooks, we catch them, we bring them to the side of the boat. We generally don't bring them on the boat because we want them to keep breathing in the water, and we want to reduce their stress. It's part of how we work ethically with animals. And we give them, it's almost like a cow tag, and then we release them like this young Caribbean reef shark you see here. And this is a really great opportunity to actually train young students and young, like we have young Cynthia here, who is Belizean and who learned how to work with sharks from a shallow location in a remote atoll called Lighthouse Reef Atoll. This is a lemon shark. And just so you get a feel for what sharking, as I like to call it, is about, I'm just going to play you this video, just a short snippet, because I know that this is us bringing the shark. This is a nice sized male bringing the shark to the side of the boat. All of these guys are fishers and they love catching. I actually have a colleague of mine taking the video at the moment. So I'm going to fast forward through this. We put a tail rope on because we want to make sure that the shark doesn't hurt itself and we want to keep it steady. So Dan is holding on to the first dorsal fin. As you can see that the animal is very quiet. So he starts the measuring tape all along the body length. And we have two key measurements, right at the base of the tail and then the full tail. And then what we do is we turn the animal over to check the sex. And what you see here is this is actually a male. So we have to measure the clasper. They actually have two claspers. Yes, they have, claspers are the shark word for penises. So they have two of them. And what you see is that they're hard, which means that they're ready to reproduce. And then we just turn them over again. So we take a little snippet for DNA. And then we get ready to put the tagger in and the tag in. And there we go. And then we release the animal. So I'm just going to move on to the next one, just because I don't want to take too much of your time. And I see that we're also running a little bit low on time here. So I'm going to just move forward with some of the results that we have in looking at hammerhead sharks, which are critically endangered to extinction. We only got them where you see the orange dots and not the yellow dots. So we know that they're rare, and we know that we need to do something that is beyond just protecting the animal or the species. We need to work towards maybe getting rid of the most important gear that actually captures them, like nets. And throughout the course of all of this, we even discovered new species. We discovered the Atlantic six-gill shark, incredibly cute little shark that lives in the deep waters and has big green eyes. And this wouldn't mean anything if we didn't share all of this information back with the communities, with the students, and that we engage. And very importantly, we need to engage more girls and women in science. So that's a really big focus for us, because we're seeing some amazing female scientists coming up from communities. And in fact, a lot of our team have women scientists as part of them, like Megan Chavez, who's our national coordinator here in Panama. And we have all kinds of great tools that we use in classrooms. And prior to the pandemic, we were taking classes and students out into the field so that they can experience sharks firsthand. Like these students that we would take out to be surrounded by 40 or 50 nurse sharks in the water, and they lose their fear. They learn monitoring techniques. But during the pandemic, what can we do? So we created virtual reality films, and please do find those on our YouTube channel with MarAlliance. They're readily available for you to download and view at your leisure. And ultimately, I just want you to know that our key objective in all this bringing everybody in, making this a real team effort, because we need all hands on decks to help sharks and rays. Ultimately, we would love to be able to see more sharks in the water, because if we see more sharks in the water, then we know that the sea is healthier and that fish and even fisheries are doing well. So that is one of our ultimate objectives. And because of how long it takes for these animals to actually grow and more, we're talking about a long-term endeavor. This is not from 1 month to the next, 1 year to the next. So in the background, you'll see one of the key fishers I started out working with in 1997, Eloy Cuevas, and right here is little Evan Cuevas. Here's Evan in 2018, and he's still working with us. So we're now working with the second, and soon it'll be the third generation of fishers as we move forward towards trying to reverse declines in fish and sharks and fisheries. And as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whom I absolutely personally adore, said, real change, enduring change, what I like to call sustainable change, happens one step at a time. It is a stepwise process. You have to be patient, and you have to bring everybody in. Everybody has a part to play in this puzzle. It's absolutely critical. And on that note, we did it. A week and a half ago, we got nets banned in Belize after over 20 years of work. We are the first nation to do so, and we are working with fishers to transition them away from nets, those who use nets, and moving towards more sustainable fisheries. And on that note, you too can help sharks. Many different ways that you can do it. When this pandemic eases up and you're able to travel again, go to some of these communities and go and meet sharks firsthand. In Belize, in Honduras, in all kinds of different places, they have really great tourism. Go to an aquarium. So many of the aquaria are really having a hard time through this period. Go and visit an aquarium if you can. Please don't eat or buy shark products, and even reduce your seafood consumption if you can, and even reduce your consumption overall. This is really critical. How many clothes do you need? How many shoes do you need? All of this, believe it or not, has an impact on our planet and ultimately on the sharks and the fish in the sea. And I would say, if you are doing a fundraiser and you don't know who to raise funds for, think of us. Think of other people who are on the front lines trying to do conservation and research with sharks and fish and fishermen. And finally, anything that you learned here today, pass it on. This is a big thing. Pass on your knowledge to others. Make more shark ambassadors wherever you go. So I want to say thank you very much for being with me throughout this whole session. And if you have any questions, please, I'd love to hear them. I love questions. And if I can't answer all of them today, do reach out to me, and we'll make the information available to you. You can find us at maralliance.org, and you can send your questions to info@maralliance.org as well. Thank you so much.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much for a great presentation. Incredibly jealous of those whale shark photos. I'd love to be in the water with the whale sharks. That was pretty incredible. And, I love the points that you made about, we have this myth surrounding sharks that they're dangerous creatures, but you look at, 73, 74 million being removed from the ocean each year. I think they have a little bit more to fear from us than we do of them. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. And congrats on the success in Belize. That's really, really cool.
Oh, it's a huge win. Huge. No other nation has done this.
All right. Amazing. So we're going to head to Calgary to start. We're going to meet up with some grade 4s hanging out in Calgary, Alberta. I'm going to bring them live into the call. How are we doing, Calgary?
How many teeth can sharks get?
Okay, so they can get, for example, in the case of the whale shark, 3,000 teeth. And they're tiny, they're tiny little teeth. And other sharks may have, 5, 10 or more rows of teeth moving back into the jaws. So a whole range of numbers for you depending on the species. And some don't even have teeth. They have crushing plates.
Thank you.
Very cool. Calgary, get another one ready. We're going to come back in a minute. We're looking forward to another sharky question. This time I'm going to go over to Michigan. We've got more grade 4s hanging out in Michigan down in the US. So let me bring them into the call.
Excellent.
How are we doing, Michigan?
Good. All right, Avery Lawrence, can you ask this question? How many different species of sharks have you found?
So my team and I, we've discovered one species, and we've helped in the discovery of a second species called Jeannie's dogfish. But the first one, the Atlantic six-gill shark, yes. And a lot of the credit goes to my technical coordinator, Ivy Barrymore.
All right, I said we're going back to Calgary. Let's grab another question about sharks if there's one in Calgary.
I'm excited about Calgary. I have cousins in Edmonton, right nearby.
Sorry about that. I wasn't paying attention.
That's okay. No big deal.
Take off the mask, or else we don't hear.
Does it hurt the sharks when you put the tag on them?
So the areas that we put the tag on, generally speaking, don't have any nerves or blood vessels. So no, they don't seem to react to having tags put onto their dorsal fin. It's mainly made of cartilage, so what you find at the tip of your nose, and skin.
Okay, thank you.
All right, great. Well, Calgary, if you have any more questions, feel free to come and wave at the camera. I'll keep an eye out
Oh, damn, Nick, I don't know what it is. Quick.
for the team. It might be someone coming in orange. Yeah.
Is it good or bad to put sharks in aquariums?
So it's interesting. I have mixed feelings about that. I think the smaller sharks that tend to be more sedentary, I don't see an issue with that. I do have an issue in putting really big sharks, like whale sharks, in aquaria. I do have an issue with that because these animals are traveling thousands of kilometers, and get this, they dive to over 2,000 meters deep, right? 6,600 feet. So how are they going to be able to survive happily in an aquarium that's only 30 feet deep?
Anybody else have a question? Nicola, go quick. If we have time, go.
All right, let's squeak in one more, and then I'll take some from you two.
Oh, go quick.
What is the least dangerous shark in the world?
I'd say all of them. I'd say all of them, really, truthfully. You know, again, look at what I showed with Bambi versus the sharks, right? You're going to look at deer and Bambi in a very different way from now on. There's so many, you wouldn't say that they're cute, but my goodness, some of them really are. Like that Atlantic six-gill shark, they're kind of cute and floppy and big eyes and, you know, but you're talking to somebody who's biased. I actually love sharks, so I don't see how they can't be cute.
I'm with you 100% on that one. And, you know, you mentioned Bambi as that example. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Toasters, chairs, vending machines, right?
Yes.
You know, more people are injured or killed by those
dogs.
here. Mm-hmm.
Even dogs and bees and all of that. So if you put all of them in the mix, it really makes you realize that sharks are just not a problem for people, but we are a big problem for them.
Yeah, it drives me crazy when I hear people say things like shark-infested water, but how can sharks infest the ocean when they belong in the ocean? So, I mean, if a shark shows up at a restaurant, sure, it's a shark-infested restaurant, but you can't really say the same thing about the ocean when that's their home, that's where they belong.
Well, they call the ocean the blue Serengeti. There's some people who call it the blue Serengeti, and it's true. When you step into the ocean, you're stepping into the blue wilds. It really is the wilds. And so you're stepping into their habitat, and they're kindly sharing it with you. And I've been diving with sharks for now, this is going to date me, but 3 decades. And, you know, all fingers and toes and all the rest. And what I like to tell people, and this is something to bear in mind, I've had tiger sharks in front of me and bull sharks and all kinds of other sharks. And same as you, Joe, right? In all of your shark diving. Would we be able to do that with lions or elephants or tigers? If we stepped out of the vehicle and decided we want to go for a stroll in the Serengeti, we love lions, they're fabulous, but could we be assured that we'd be okay? Whereas in so many instances, you'll be just fine in swimming with sharks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to grab a few questions from YouTube here. I have a question here from Lori, and she's wondering if nets are banned in areas, do you worry that will lead to an increase in something like longline fishing?
That's an excellent question. And yes, I am concerned about that. In fact, we have seen an anecdotal move in some cases away from some of the fishers who used to fish only with nets towards long lines. So we'll have to monitor that very closely.
All right. Another question here. This is from a grade 7 student, Mr. Donald's group, Jackson, and he's wondering, I think you mentioned the Greenland sharks and how long, you know, they potentially live. Are they the longest living species that we know of? And then how do we age a shark?
Perfect. I love it. Great question. So yes, at this point, they are considered the longest living vertebrate on Earth. And the way that they were actually determining the age is not the traditional way in which we determine age with sharks, which is usually using a vertebrae, cutting across the vertebrae and then counting the bands, almost like tree rings. And they couldn't do that with this species. And so they were looking for a part of the body that would be a lot more specific in terms of giving age bands. And so they looked at the eye, the lens of the eye, and they were able to actually determine through a cut of the eye and the analysis of the lens that there were certain spikes in radioactive materials that coincided with bomb detonations in the mid 1900s. And using that as a proxy, they were able to then say, oh, okay, well, this is the amount of time that this radioactive component takes to degrade. We can then assume that this is how old this animal is. That wasn't the best way of it. So basically the eye lens and using what we call isotopes of carbon, especially.
All right, very cool. Miss Becker's group, they're wondering about where in the world do you think the best shark tourism practices are?
So I would have said that we had very few locations that I would promote previously, but now I say that there's quite a few. So I would say Belize has good shark tourism practices, Bahamas, pretty good in Northwest Madagascar as well, Australia, Philippines, let's see, where else? South Africa, especially with the great whites. So, I would say that there's quite a few. I know a lot of people, Mexico, several sites in Mexico, they're really making a big effort to be stringent with the requirements so that they not only keep the tourists safe, but also the animals safe.
Okay, one more question from YouTube. And, it might be too early to tell things like this, but this person's curious about what's going on during the pandemic. Are there less maybe boats out? Is this helping shark species, or is it just too early to tell?
So this is a really tough one to figure out, in part because a lot of the monitoring has been curtailed, because even we can't go out, a lot of fishers can't go out. So there was a period of several months where boats were just not even allowed out of port. So you'd think, brilliant. This would reduce fishing effort. And in fact, in some cases and countries, we were seeing anecdotally that this actually did lead to a positive result for sharks. For example, in Cape Verde, that period of time when the boats could not go out to fish meant that some of the females could actually pup, because the period of May through July is especially a key pupping time for a lot of species in the Northern Hemisphere tropics. And so they were seeing more juvenile hammerheads in coastal areas and in bayments, which is a really good sign. However, when you don't have a lot of people going out, it also means that you probably don't have a lot of eyes and enforcement, which then means that there's a lot of illegal activities occurring. And we have heard anecdotally that there is an increase in poaching, transboundary poaching and illegal fishing, and some of that will be with sharks. But I will add another 2 dimensions to answer this question, which is that they might be catching, but then when they get back to port, they're having a hard time selling their fish, because the whole market chain for seafood in many of these countries, and especially from communities to mid-sized towns and even larger towns, collapsed or was severely damaged. So they couldn't get ice, they couldn't get their fish to market, they couldn't sell. And so why go out and spend money on gas and kill all these animals that they can't even sell? So again, a little too early to know, but we are seeing indications that fish caught a break for a while, but now things might be going back to where they were pre-pandemic.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up with this one question from Sienna. Sienna is thinking about that shark, that six-gilled Atlantic shark, and really wants to know where you found that, what country or where were you?
So you're gonna love it. We chugged out literally 10 minutes from our office on the coast of Ambergris Key in Belize. And my technical coordinator, Ivy Barrymore, who's leading the Deep Shark project, dropped her lines down. This is part of the project she's leading, and now it's becoming part of her PhD. She dropped the lines down, and literally there, 10 minutes from our office, caught that species. And then we were finding registers from other areas, like in the Gulf of Mexico and other parts of the Caribbean. But yeah, pretty exciting that one can be so close to the office and find new species. And on that note, just to let you know, finding new species in the deep all the time. So lots of discoveries to be made if you want to join the shark research world. Absolutely.
A great career to think about, marine biology, ocean science, getting out there, because we're just scratching the surface, right? There's so much from mapping the seafloor to finding potentially, millions of new species. So lots left to explore and discover in our oceans. So very cool. I want to start off with a huge shout out to our classrooms for joining us today. Thank you so much for the great questions coming in. Rachel, and a huge shout out to you. Thank you for the work that you're doing with MarAlliance. And thank you for taking some time to hang out with us and share some of that with us. It's amazing work. And, we always see the stories on the news. The news likes to focus on the negative. So it's good to hear some positive stories, working with the communities and, that 20-year fight to get the nets banned in Belize. I mean, just shows if you apply some pressure and keep working and the science is with you, you can get things done.
Absolutely. And, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, persevere, and you shall get there. But I'm an optimist. I'm seeing people's attitudes and perceptions towards sharks changing, people's consumer patterns changing. They're eating less seafood and they care for the oceans. And so everybody has a part to play here and everybody can support. So I'm very thankful to everybody who joined us today and wanted to listen a little bit more about sharks and the journey to community research and conservation.
All right, excellent. Well, again, a huge thank you. Thanks, everybody. We're going to sign off for today and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.